I'm Zippy Duvall. I'm president of American Farm Bureau and host for Farmside Chat. And I'm glad to have everyone back listening today. And we're going to go up north into Wisconsin and talk to a great, young, energetic, very involved goat farmer, meat goat farmer. And her name is Leslie Svacina. The name of her farm is Siloam Rolling Acres. I went to high school in Siloam, Georgia, so I was close. We're proud to have you here, and you're in Wisconsin. She's heavily involved in raising goat meat, marketing to the consumers local, and also doing a lot of conservation and sustainability work on a farm. So we're really excited about talking to you about your farm. So tell us a little bit about how you got into goat farming, what led you there, and a little bit of your background.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Zippy. These are two of my favorite topics, conservation and goats. So I am a little bit of my background. I didn't grow up on a farm. I grew up in northeastern Wisconsin outside of Green Bay. And I kind of came into agriculture a little bit different route, but probably not that uncommon from, I'd say, probably newer generations in agriculture today. I took a high school agriculture class my freshman year of high school in horticulture because there wasn't an art class that looked like it was of interest, and it kind of all went from there. I started to learn a lot more about agriculture, the different aspects of it, and also the different career opportunities, and got really involved in FFA, which led me on to study agriculture marketing in college. I worked in that field for quite a while, but then made a shift to working in higher education, doing career and academic advising with college students. But I kept finding myself wanting to be back in agriculture. And some of that time I was working with agriculture students, and my husband and I were he works in the agriculture field, but in the business side of things. And we were looking at buying some land initially for recreational purposes, but then started to think about like, what could we do for our own business? I come from a family of entrepreneurs. And so I started looking at some different options with a farm. I knew I wanted to do direct marketing. I started talking to I was talking to a lot of my different friends about what I might do. And one of my friends is a high school agriculture teacher in a community north of us, and there's a large Somalian population. And she really recommended that I take a look at raising meat goats. And so that's really how the interest came into play, was really looking at market opportunity. There's not a lot of people who are doing it at a larger scale. Other parts of the country that may be a little bit more common, but not as much in our area. And the more I learned about the market, the more I saw that there is a need to fill with helping, as our country gets more diverse culturally, so do dietary preferences, food choices, and it's not as easy to find goat. And so I came into goat that way. And so now, over 10 years now in this business, that we've been moved from, with the goal of always direct marketing, we've moved into kind of selling whole animals on that kind of traditional freezer model, and a little bit of traditional livestock market selling, to being able to sell everything direct from our farm, cuts of meat, where we're actually, most of our meat we're focusing on the upper Midwest for selling our products through a shipping model, but we still have options for folks who are closer to do on-farm pickup. So it's been fun to kind of see that evolve over time. And I've really enjoyed being a part of this, of creating something kind of from the ground up. It's been a lot of work, don't get me wrong, from a farming perspective, and also jumping into direct marketing as well.
Yeah. So direct marketing whole animals or by the piece, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So when you do market a whole animal, for the people that don't really know, I mean, I come in and buy a whole animal, you take it and have it harvested for me, or I pick it up and I have to go have it harvested?
Yes. So we are selling right now, the way that we're selling it as a whole animal is through our subscription club program. So folks can sign up for it that way, but they will get a box of meat with all the cuts and packaged meat that would come from a whole animal. But before that, when we were selling a whole animal to customers, before we got into having on-farm storage for our meat, we worked with the butcher. Our customers would order the whole goat from us, but then we would send a list of cut specifications to the butcher. So that might be, maybe they want it all cut up into cubed meat or stew meat. Maybe it's the chop, they want to get the chops and some steaks, and then everything else is stew. And so it varies. The one thing that is unique to goats, and it's similar to sheep, is that we would also, when we got started, we had to focus, as we've grown, we've had to focus our direction more. But a number of my peers will sell their goats this way. We have sold goats live for the purpose of eating. So customers may come and buy the goat from us, and then they'll take it home and do the harvest and cut and package themselves. So it's a little bit unique when it comes to this segment of animal agriculture, but it's not that uncommon. We look at the customer base that is a very diverse in cultural background. We're looking at our customers who either maybe are first generation immigrant or second generation, who this is how their parents and their grandparents are accustomed to purchasing goat. And then just aside from the fact that it's hard to get in the grocery store, so it's kind of that route in. So that's kind of how we had started, and then I've talked a little bit about where we're at now too.
So I'm in the beef business and sell about 3 loads a year, and I'd love to do direct marketing, but can't do that because there's no processing plant close to me that's USDA inspected. So what about you? Does it have to be USDA inspected? And if it does, how far you have to go to get that USDA inspection?
So yes, no, great question. So for us, because we ship, so our product goes across borders, and because we're only an hour from the Minneapolis metro area, so close to the Minnesota border, it's in our interest to have it be USDA inspected. If we were on the other side of the state, we could operate as a state inspected, but we would need to keep our footprint more local or more regional. But we've been fortunate to have a good existing relationship with our processor, but I do need to plan out about a year in advance to make sure I'm on his calendar, which I know that I'm probably in a better situation than a lot of my peers who are trying to work with other butchers that might need, or processors where they need to be out. They may be out 2 years in advance. I've also shifted my production model. So we're harvesting in sometime typically most of the time when we're harvesting our goats, it's between January and March, which is a little bit different because in the fall is typically when a lot of farmers in our area are looking to get their livestock harvested and cut and packaged by processors. It's also a really busy time of year for processors in our area because of hunting season. So I've also been willing to work with our processor, and part of that is, adjusting our production model too for that, which has helped us get access to work with them more.
So obviously that's a multi-animal processing plant. Is it small, large, or small? Because there's a lot of conversation across the country about processing.
Yes. So I would call this probably like mid-size, small processor. So we're fortunate in our area to have a number of smaller processors that are state inspector USDA, though those numbers, I would say even before the COVID changed our world, started to decrease just because of staffing, retirements. A lot of the shops were run by families. So this processor that we're working with, he's a little bit larger than some of the smaller shops in our area. And he's also taken the approach, he's got his own retail space, but he also works a lot with farmers who are or like us, who are direct marketing. So most of the business, like for example, when we get goats processed, we're running somewhere between 10 to 20 head at a time that are all cut and packaged the same way. There might be a little variation, but he likes to have that consistency. I think it helps him keep things running smoother in his production and, in his side of the line with processing. So it's a little different style than a place where we might be able to get on the schedule for, a handful of animals at a time. So.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So being multi-species processing plant, do you know whether or not he's been able to take advantage of some of the USDA grants to help him expand?
I am not sure. I know he's talked with me about that because we've worked with some USDA projects and also some state local food grants as well. I know it's something that's been on his radar. I do know he's worked with some of the local economic development corporation for um, helping even the location where he was at getting established in that area. So I know it's on his radar. And every
Yeah.
time I see things, I send it to him because I want to keep him in business because I don't want to have to find another butcher. Because part of the other thing for us with processing is not everybody wants to cut goats just because they're small and time consuming. So like if I've got a good thing going, I want to keep it there too and help support his business as well.
Yeah, we've worked real hard as an organization to promote the investment in small, medium-sized processing.
Mm-hmm.
That farmers could have more direct marketing, and
Mm-hmm.
people like not close to agriculture needs to know that. That's one of the things we do to help them. They're not even in agriculture with us. Advocating for that helps them have more direct marketing available to them. So
Mm-hmm.
before I leave goats and go to conservation, you got to tell me what's your favorite cut coming out of a meat goat, and how
Mm-hmm.
would you compare it? Because I love
Mm-hmm.
to eat different foods.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. My most recent area or recipe or type of way to cook goat has been using it can be done with stew meats or with a roast is making birria stew. So it's a Mexican dish or stew that is originating in Guadalajara, Mexico. And a couple of years ago, it kind of became a food craze on TikTok and Instagram of birria tacos. And a lot of it, what's interesting is historically it originated with goat meat, but because it's not as accessible, it's often made with beef. So I really like making the birria stew, and then I've made ramen with it at tacos, pizza. You kind of use the meat from the stew and make all sorts of great food with it. But it's a great dish that's been one of my favorites to make.
Yeah. So a lot of the people in my area that have high blood pressure will eat goat meat.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the health benefits that you know of from eating goat meat?
Goat is, I would call it very comparable to beef as a red meat for a lot of the nutritional benefits. But the one thing that, it's right up there with comparable in calories and protein, but it is quite a bit leaner. So, and I love beef, so I'm not knocking anybody who raises beef or consumes it, but goat is really a very nutrient dense protein. And when you look at the serving size of 3 ounces, it's high in protein, it's lean. So it has a lot of great benefits from that aspect. And I love it from the perspective of that because it is so versatile in coming into a dish that represents different cultural backgrounds. It can really take on different flavors and tastes and textures that you wouldn't expect depending on how it's cooked and the style of cooking and the cultural influence of the dish too.
So what changed a little bit from talking about the
Sure.
goat itself in that process to talking about your farm and your sustainability and conservation program? Tell us a little bit about. I see you're enrolled in CSP. Tell everybody what CSP is and EQIP is. I know that, but a lot of my listeners aren't farmers. So tell them.
Sure. So CSP and EQIP are programs, are conservation programs that are part of the Farm Bill. And I should know off the top of my head what they stand for.
Conservation Stewardship Program.
Thank you. And then EQIP, you might need to help me with that one as well.
I'm not sure I can tell you.
but I can tell you though
environmental something. So
yes, exactly. So they're both programs that are designed to help farmers and landowners implement conservation practices that is good for the environment and also helps be mindful of like how we're managing our soil and the wildlife, and then also utilizing different conservation tools to accomplish our goals as farmers. And we've been fortunate to be able to participate in both these programs. We're currently in the CSP program. It's kind of like the big kid program for conservation. You start with equip and then you graduate on to implement conservation practices. But we had started with the equip program about a year, I'd say about 2 years after we bought our farm. We had some things to take care of. Our farm was a retired dairy farm that hadn't been in production for a long time. So we had some things to just get in place before we could get livestock on our farm and get going. But at that time, I had participated in a program called Annie's Project. It's a education program that in a lot of states is administered through extension or farm credit, where they help women farmers or work on business plans and develop out their project plans. And the one that I participated in was focused on, excuse me, direct marketing in our area. But that's where I learned about NRCS. That's through the USDA. So it's the department that helps administer these programs. And the one practice in particular that's been at the core of what we're doing as a farm is rotational grazing with our livestock. And so I first learned about it through that program. And the more I learned about grazing as a management tool, I knew that was something that I wanted to incorporate into our farming practices. So that was kind of the gateway in to meeting with our NRCS office and starting to learn about these programs. And so we worked with Equip to help us get started with grazing. So we worked with them on the technical side of things, actually like learning the best practices and how to manage our land and graze with livestock. So we aren't just putting our livestock out there on the pasture and saying, see ya in fall. It's a managed approach. So we're moving our animals from smaller paddocks every few days to which helps. It's beneficial for continuing to improve the plant growth, the soil health, and also health of our animals. The conservation, that EQUIP program also helped us with infrastructure. So it was a cost share program that helped us install fence. If anybody has goats or small ruminants, goat fence is not cheap because you want to keep them in. I don't want to have bad neighbors. That was a priority of mine. Or bad relationships with neighbors, testing those fencing laws or trying to then I might have to make cookies and bring them over to them and apologize about my goats that got out.
I do that when I have to spray chicken litter. When I'm spraying chicken litter, you take them some cookies first,
Exactly. Good neighbors, it goes a long way. So the EQUIP program also helped us with installing seasonal water lines. So we were able to access water out to our pastures and a number of other things. And, for us, it really, as beginning farmers, I'm not so beginning anymore, I'm kind of on the tail end of it. It was really helpful for us because not only were we able to implement farming practices that had in tune with the environment and mindful of the soil and the ecosystem around our farm, but it also gave us the technical expertise to get started, and then also that helped us with the infrastructure. And that was really critical for us because it's farming. I mean, I don't need to tell you, Zippy, but like farming is an asset heavy business. I mean, no matter what way you slice it, whether you're renting or not land. And so that piece was really helpful for us. And then the practice of, I talked about some of the benefits of grazing, but it also has helped us run a really cost-effective, sustainable business model for us because we're able to keep our feed costs down because we're utilizing that pasture. Grazing has really helped us also as business owners, as farmers, keep a really sustainable business as well, because it's able to help us operate livestock that are hardy, self-sufficient, low cost. They do well on lower level of inputs, so it's been good for us holistically. So now with CSP, we started that program, that conservation program, a couple years after the EQUIP program finished, and now we're looking at next level practices. What can we do to build on our conservation practices here on our farm? So some of the things we've been doing, we had a couple of fields that we rented out to another area farmer that it made sense for us as we were getting started to do that, but it was an existing cropland, and so we converted that to a perennial crop of hay for us. As you get more livestock, you need to feed them more. So that was great a number of reasons, but that EQUIP helped us with converting that cropland over. We were able to implement some other conservation practices with using no-till planting. We have a little no-till drill, like a little baby 4-foot one it's been great for us when we graze in the woods and doing some pasture renovation, but we were able to work with a fellow Farm Bureau member that lives fairly nearby, and we rented his larger no-till drill. So we were able to get that accomplished without, and kind of in line with our goal of using best practices with conservation. And now our other piece is we've started to do is we're actually grazing in the summertime through our hay field. So we're able to actually get more animal activity on our hay ground, which, we spread, our winter bed pack manure on our fields. We haven't been able to get the full benefit of having livestock on our land until now. So I'm kind of excited to see how this will help improve our pastures by utilizing our animals in that grazing system. So it's kind of, I kind of nerd out on grazing because it's like taking the principles of how bison used to graze, from long ago, but just doing it in a managed system with electric fence and moving animals along. So that's where we're at right now. We actually are in the process of applying for the EQUIP program for conservation practices in our woods. We have about 60 acres of woods that that are in need of some conservation practices. So one area in particular, it still isn't oak savanna, but it was a prairie pasture with giant oaks in it, but it is like a jungle of buckthorn in there. So I'm hoping we will still work. We've been working on doing some management practices to help get rid of those invasives, but I'm hoping that we're able to partner with this conservation program because it'll make it a little bit more doable for us to do that. Once we have that buckthorn out, we'll be able to have more native prairie grasses start to grow back in there, and it'll be good for us for a feed source for one time a year grazing our livestock, but it also will be really beneficial for our local wildlife because right now they don't have as much feed source. They're busy eating, the neighbor's corn or our hay right now just because they have our stored hay, because they don't have a lot of feed source. That, of course, that's a little different in the winter, but yeah, so those are some of the practices and programs. And I found that the conservation programs, I've been involved with our local watershed groups and other conservation efforts and our grazing groups. And I find that the Farm Bill programs that are focused on conservation are really a great tool for helping farmers start to learn more about new practices or start to put things into play because it's a big risk to start to change your practice. Some practices are no-brainers, easy to jump into, but if you have a farm and a business that you've been running and it's been working well, sometimes making that shift can be a challenge, even though you want to do good by your land and your environment because it's it supports the livelihood of where we're at, but to try new things can be a challenge. And I think that's really where this conservation program is really beneficial because it helps us as landowners put some of these practices into play and continue to help us be better at what we do because that is really the core of who we are as farmers.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard a great testimony about the benefits of Farm Bill, not just for farmers, but everybody that lives in our country. It helps young beginning farmers like Leslie get into business and be sustainable, financially sustainable. And without that, we could not do some of the conservation stuff we do because the margins are so thin that monies wouldn't be there. So cost sharing between the federal government and farmers help make sure we protect the natural resources and keep that ecosystem turning. And she's exactly right. Rotational grazing is a great thing. I do it with 400 cows a year. And you keep the grass at the right level where it grows the fastest, where it consumes sequesters the most carbon, and do all the right things for our environment and the climate. And that's what the Farm Bill does for every American across this country. Plus, it also makes sure that food supply is secure and safe for them. So what a great testimony. I appreciate you going into it that deep because it was tremendous. I don't want to let you go before we talk a little bit about your Farm Bureau involvement.
Sure.
I understand you was involved in working with your Wisconsin Farm Bureau to develop a sustainability statement. Can you tell us a little bit about that and other
Sure.
things that you've been involved with?
Yeah. So on the sustainability statement, actually, I'll back up a little bit more. So about, I don't know if it was a year or a year and a half before that, I was a part of a strategic planning process for our state. And our state does this every, I think, 5 or 7 years. This is the first time I've been a part of it, but we had a group of about 20 of us meet, actually with a facilitator from American Farm Bureau. She did a great job, and it was all member driven. We talked about where we wanted to see our organization go into the future. And what was really interesting is that the conversation came up, do we include something about the environment in our strategic plan? And we went back and forth, and we didn't go back and forth because it didn't the environment and sustainability doesn't mean to us, it doesn't mean anything to us, or we were at different ends of the spectrum. But we had this kind of long discussion of like, being a keeper of the land, the keeper of the soil and resources has always been at the core of what we do as farmers. And we know that, and we talk about that. I mean, it's to the core of who we are, but do we need to acknowledge that within our organization? But we also recognize that that's becoming being aware of the environment and how we use our resources, and that whole topic is very top of mind for anybody in our society, and more so with consumers. And there's obviously a lot of connections with how does agriculture interact in that and work with, and function in that mindset. And so we decided it was really important for our organization to include the environment, or sustainability, I think was the word that we chose for our state, to be part of our strategic plan and our pillars for our organization, and really look at like, how do we talk about what we're doing as farmers, what we're doing on our farms, and then also, sharing our stories, because I think as farmers we tend to be humble, and we're busy. Let's not to mention that, and we don't take the time to talk about what we're doing, and not to mention, as I said, it's at the core of what we do. So sometimes it's not top of mind to actually acknowledge why we do certain practices, even though there's a lot of reasoning behind it when it comes to protecting the soil and managing how much we use for inputs or other resources in our water. And we also looked at how can we help facilitate sharing of resources and learning from each other, the peer-to-peer learning. So anyways, that's where it came from. And then I was honored to be asked to be a part of this small committee who developed the sustainability statement. And it really was an evolution from that earlier conversation. And we really wanted to have something that spoke to what it meant to our organization and our members, because I also can go on the other side of the coin and acknowledge that it's really easy now in this day and age for people to want to greenwash everything as well, and throw around terminology. And we didn't want to have that just be something that we put up on the wall and say, oh, this is what we're doing. We wanted to have a common definition, something that our members could get behind, and also be on the same page as talking about what does sustainability mean to our organization. So, and just a fun little thing, it's been fun to see it evolve within our organization. And I love to learn and see what other farmers are doing, especially, we're grass farmers at raise small ruminants. I'm familiar with, row crop farming and dairy, our dairy farm friends in our area, because they tend to be more common. But I love learning about what they're doing for different practices with their farms, because it's just all different tools and how we manage our land with the same goal in mind. But the one thing that's been really fun besides that is Rachel, who runs or kind of manages some of our sustainability work with Wisconsin Farm Bureau, asked me to judge one of our categories for our young farmer and agriculturalist program, the 35 under 35 in sustainability this year. And I judged the farmer category. I'm sure it had a more professional title to it, but we watched videos about these members who have talked about how they're involved in sustainability in production agriculture. And I just I had after like at their annual meeting, I went and was like hunting people down that like I've never met before because I saw them on this video, and I just had to compliment them on what they're doing because it was like, it just, I know, I recognize all farmers are on their different journey of conservation practices and sustainability, but it was like so much, it like made me feel so good that like we have these young farmers and professionals who are working with farmers that get it. Like they get why we need to have and use these practices and protect our resources and, and continue to improve our soils. And so it made me super excited and just feeling good, like almost made me cry, which I'm like, I don't cry. And thinking about the future for not only Farm Bureau, but like Wisconsin agriculture, our industry. And we think about like, how do we continue to take our farms to the next level, and also recognizing that we need to take good care of our resources. So it's been really fun to be a part of that journey, but I've been really thankful to also be a part of Farm Bureau from being a goat farmer. We didn't even get into this, which is totally fine because I know we wanted to talk more about conservation, but the goat industry is so disjointed. We don't have producer groups, we don't have federal checkoff dollars. So Farm Bureau, it just adds a lot of layers of complication when it comes to industry growth and challenges. We get overlooked a lot. I'm not gonna, again, this is not the poor goat farmer story, but I've been really fortunate to be able to work with Wisconsin Farm Bureau and even American Farm Bureau too, to help add my voice to our general farm organization, but also look for ways that I can speak up about issues that might be impacting us as a direct market farmer, or some of the issues related to goat farming. And there's more I know I can do, because if you don't speak up, it's kind of like the voice of agriculture. If you don't speak up, nobody knows. So I've been really appreciative of being able to be involved with Farm Bureau from that matter. And it's been a great organization to be able to have access to, decision makers, but also help give me the skills so I can, do my job as a member and as a farmer, to speak up and talk about things that are impacting our farm. But at the county level, I've been involved with our county. I'm on our county board, had a time where I was our county president, but I've got a growing business and young kids. So now I'm engaged, but in activity, but a little less on the leadership role right now, but I'm sure I'll get pulled back into that in the future as well. So
I'm sure we're going to pull you back. And what another great testimony of why you ought to be a Farm Bureau member, whether you're a consumer or a producer. Everyone ought to be a Farm Bureau member because we're out there doing things to help them. And we provide a vehicle for farmers to ride on to make sure that their voice gets heard. So, and that's what we're doing here in these podcasts, is making sure that you and goat meat producers are having your voice heard through this podcast, and talking about conservation and sustainability and family farms, and that's what it's all about. So I think we've run pretty good. I mean, you and I could talk forever. I could tell that. So somebody's ride that's listening to us is getting shorter and they want to hear the end of it. So look, why don't you tell everybody how they can connect with you, whether it be to buy something from you or just learn more about what you're doing, but social media. Why don't you tell them, talk about your farm and how they might connect with you?
Sure. Thank you. So if folks are interested in learning or purchasing goat meat, or learning more about how to cook goat recipes, goat meat nutrition, you can visit my farm website, CylonRollingAcres.com. I'm guessing you'll probably share some of those, how to spell it as well. Oh, I guess it's behind me too. And then I also have a farming, or for those of you who are listening who are farmers or ranchers or aspiring to maybe raise goats, I also have a website called Grazing with Leslie. I have an extensive farming blog and also some consulting work, or kind of my consulting page. But I have a lot of resources about rotational grazing, conservation practices, marketing goats. So if folks are interested in learning more about or diving in deeper on some of those topics, that is another resource. And both, I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. My websites have the most information, but you can find me on those other spaces as well too, just under those names.
Thank you, Leslie, for joining us. And I hope that God continues to spread his blessings across you and your farm and your family, and that you continue to be a good Farm Bureau leader there, because I've seen what you've done and I know you'll be doing a lot more. And thanks to everyone that's listening. This is Zippy Duvall, President American Farm Bureau, on the Farmside Chat. We hope that you'll join us, suggest new stories to us, and share it with other people. Thank you, and God bless you. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Farmside Chat. Please be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, take a minute to rate and review the podcast. This helps us continue to bring you farm fresh content that everyone can enjoy. Until next time, thank you and God bless you.